With this context having been established, let's jump straight into the session for today. Now, the topic was the role of blockchain in cybercrime. How do I tackle this topic? This is something that I was asking myself. And then I realized in order to give you an effective training on the role that blockchain plays in advancing cybercrime around the world, in order to achieve this effectively, I will have to touch upon different areas, different subjects. These subjects are what you see here on the agenda. We will start with understanding what is the dark web. Okay. The dark web is a completely different field from blockchain, but you will see towards the end how they all come together. So we'll understand what is the dark web itself. After that, we will understand blockchain. We'll understand the architecture of blockchain and how it's going to transform several sectors of industry all over the world. After this, we will try to understand what is cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies are just one form of implementation of blockchain itself. So what are cryptocurrencies? How do they work? We'll understand that. And in section 3, we are going to look at how cryptocurrencies are supporting cyber criminals in advancing their tactics, in advancing their movements across different areas, different sectors, and different organizations. Lastly, we will look at how organizations such as those of yours, how these organizations can stay safe from the ever-present, ever-looming threat of cybercrime, particularly those which pertain to blockchain implementations. With this context being established, let me delve right into the sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you, the session is interactive, which is why we're using Teams. You can see each other, you can see the questions that everyone is asking. So please feel free to make it interactive. You can definitely type your questions into the chat window. And towards the end, we will have a dedicated slot just for Q&A, at which point you're also welcome to unmute yourself and to share your views, questions, opinions, challenges, anything. Definitely, we can talk about it towards the end. All right, with this having been said, let's get going with the dark web. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a simple question. When was the last time you searched for something on Google? Googling is almost second nature to all of us. You have a thought in your mind, and within less than a second, we find ourselves just typing it into our phones. What is the GDP of this particular country? What is the largest road? What is the longest road in the world? I don't know. Whatever the thought is that comes to our minds, we find ourselves simply Googling and finding the answers left, right, and center. But have we ever spared a second thought towards how this whole process of Googling works? What are the steps? What are the steps that follow every time you type something into that Google search bar? Well, the answer is a process called spidering. And this is the way in which Google's search algorithm works. The algorithm itself is called page rank algorithm. And what it does is the search queries that you and I we type into the search bar, these are mapped against the content across different web pages. Now these web pages, they are ranked very effectively based on the proximity of the heading itself of the web page to the search query. If not the heading, then the contents of the web page. How close is it to the query that you and I are searching for? Apart from this, it also looks at other parameters and other metadata pertaining to this page itself. How recent was the content updated? How many links to other websites does this particular web page have? How many visitors to this web page? And a lot of other data which jumps into what you see when you log into Google Analytics for your website. So spidering is a process through which the page rank algorithm scans different pages on the World Wide Web and returns results which are surprisingly very accurate. This in fact is why Google is very good at search. The algorithm is extremely effective. Now let me ask you a question. When you search for let's say, which is the largest country in the world? The answer, of course, is Russia. When you type this question on Google, you will be returned with results pertaining to the public internet. This is so obvious that we don't spare a second thought to it. If someone writes an email to his or her friend that says, Russia is the largest country in the world, that email and the contents of that email are definitely not going to be shown on your Google search results, right? There is, of course, the feature in Google where you get results pertaining to your own inbox, but not that of somebody else. Now, why is this happening? The reason is there is a level of authentication that you need to go through before you are able to access that person's email. This part of the World Wide Web, where users have to pass through at least one level of authentication, is what we call the deep web. So search engines like Google, Bing, or any other search engine, Alpha Vista, or whatever it is, their search results are based only on the public pages of the World Wide Web, the so-called surface web. The same part of the internet where users have to pass through one level of authentication. It's not used to search for, it's not used to return queries for any search that users type into these search engines. This part of the World Wide Web is what we call the deep web. Now take it to the next level. What if we're not talking about regular Gmail or regular Office Outlook emails that you and I are using? What if we need to communicate with each other but remain virtually untraceable? This part of the World Wide Web is what we call the dark web, ladies and gentlemen. The dark web is still a part of the internet. It's still a part of the regular internet that you and I know. It's just that the way in which users access them, the way in which traffic flows over these different layers of the internet is different from the regular internet that you and I are aware of. This part of the internet is what is called the dark web. Now, a cyber criminal looking to make money off the internet, for them, it is extremely important that they remain untraceable and still they are able to receive payments. This is exactly why they love the dark web. Consider the case where you and I, we just take stock of how much data we are leaving on the internet as we go about our day-to-day lives, Googling, Facebooking, Instagramming, making payments online, communicating with friends on WhatsApp, Skype, or even submitting our biometrics, fingerprints. Maybe it's for accessing the data center in your office, or maybe it's any other requirements that are hosted by your respective national governments. All of our data is out there on the internet. For a cyber criminal, this is very, very bad news. He or she, they need to remain untraceable. They need to maintain their anonymity. This is why the dark web is extremely important for them. Now, how does the dark web work? Very simple question, but the answer is a little bit more complicated. Consider the case where you are accessing Chrome through your laptop and you type www.google.com. Now, when you type this request into your browser, you type the domain name, google.com. It gets resolved into the corresponding IP addresses. And through your ISP, which is Do, Etisalat, or whatever ISP you're using, it gets routed over the internet to Google's data centers. And within less than a second, you get the response thrown back onto your screen and you can see the homepage, www.google.com. Now, here's the thing about the dark web. Web pages on the dark web, they don't have a .com extension. They don't have a .org or a .gov sort of an extension. They have an extension called .onion. You type a URL like this into your Chrome browser or any other regular browser, Firefox, Edge, or Apple Safari. They can't read this particular format of a domain name. They don't understand this. This is the syntax of web pages and domain names on the dark web. In order to access this, we need specific browsers which are tailor-made for accessing and navigating the dark web. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you this, it is 100% illegal in many countries to access the dark web. So please do not do this. Including here in the UAE, it is a federally punishable offense as per the UAE cybercrime law to access the dark web. So please do not try this, do not do it. But for your knowledge, the browser of choice for cyber criminals is a specific browser called Tor. The onion router, that's what it stands for, right? So when a user types in a URL like www.1387 etc. into the Tor browser, what it does is it calculates a path, and this path is what is selected to route the packet from the source to the destination. Now, when I said path, you would have guessed it consists of a lot of routers in between the source and the destination. Well, the answer is no, it's not passing through routers. It doesn't follow the regular packet routing protocols that you and I are familiar with for IPv4, IPv6. It relies on other users who also have Tor browsers installed on their laptops, on their computers. These users have given up their laptops to act as volunteer nodes, which means they act as intermediary hops, collecting packets and routing them on to the next hop. So this path that is selected, it is extremely random every time. And guess what? There can be as many as 6,000 hops between every source and every destination packet. Now, the path is very random. This is rule number one. What is rule number two? And this is what makes tracing people virtually impossible on the dark web. For every single hop, there will be one layer of encryption. So this means 6,000 layers of encryption, up to 6,000 for every single packet that flows between source and destination. And this is strong encryption, mind you. It's not easily crackable encryption. At least AES 256-bit encryption. So it is virtually impossible to try to trace and track users who are accessing the dark web because of this. The path is, first of all, extremely random. And secondly, packets are encrypted as many as 6,000 times before it reaches the destination. Now, for a cyber criminal, the dark web is a massive playground. They use the dark web to make transactions, to demand ransomware payments, to sell banned substances as well as services, to sell crimeware, tools that script kiddies can use if they want to, download some hacking applications and simply launch ransomware attacks without having any sort of hacking knowledge by themselves. All these sorts of activities are carried out in the dark web. How do these guys get paid? The answer is cryptocurrencies, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the blockchain. Now, Bitcoin is one of the most popular implementations of the blockchain itself. Before understanding blockchain, I want to explain to you how much traction blockchain and Bitcoin, of course, has gained within the last 10 years. Bitcoin was published by an anonymous individual or maybe a group of individuals going by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. Came out in 2008 when this individual published a paper where he or she, they proposed a new model for banking, a new model for currencies to be created and then to be dissipated across a target audience, currencies to have value and currency to support transactions. This was a very, very disruptive model which had the potential to completely turn the banking industry that we know today upside down. Now, if you look at the date 2008, it's very interesting because 2008 is when the financial crisis played out. So it is possible that Mr. or Ms. Satoshi Nakamoto was frustrated by the weaknesses of the financial ecosystem that was in existence and had a motivation to bring about some transformations. Within just 2 years, the first cryptocurrency exchange called the Bitcoin market was established in 2010, and the model took off. By 2015, we had 1 billion blockchain transactions every single day, announced by Settle in the UK. And 2019, just 4 years later, after 2015, was when we saw more and more enterprise adoption of blockchain being announced all over the world. And in fact, 2019 was called the year of enterprise blockchain itself. But what really is blockchain, ladies and gentlemen? Let's try to understand this first of all. What is a concept of blockchain? I like to compare it with news, because you and I, we always are familiar with news, how to read newspapers, how to consume news. We have different platforms through which we do this. Now, considering traditional media, we have the Times, we have the CNNs, we have the BBCs, the Wall Street Journals, and so on of the world. These organizations are responsible for identifying news stories worth telling. They are responsible for bringing these stories to the rest of us in this world. So there is a little bit of so-called institutionalized control of news. They decide and they publish. With the advent of social media, you and I, we have the power to create news. We can create videos, we can create stories, and these have the potential to become viral. And this becomes the news story of the next day. What we've done here is we have, to some extent, limited the institutionalized control of these traditional media houses, these traditional press houses. Of course, the way in which social media is playing out, there are other dangers of fake news, for example. And I would highly recommend that you also read up on the threats of fake news, which the threat of misinformation rather than real information, which is the latest threat of social media these days. Well, blockchain seeks to achieve something which is very similar to the model that we just explored. The objective of blockchain is to have distributed and decentralized control within an ecosystem for everybody, which means you don't have one single entity who is controlling the different players in an ecosystem. Everybody sees and shares transactions with each other. So there is complete transparency and everybody sees what everybody else is doing. The other part about the blockchain is it is completely unalterable. It relies on something called hashing. We'll talk about it in some time today. It relies on hashing to make sure that once a record goes into the blockchain, it cannot ever be removed. It cannot ever be altered. It is virtually unalterable, right? Let's try to understand the blockchain by taking the analogy of the music industry, something that you and I, we can easily relate to, the music industry. Now, in a typical ecosystem of the music industry, you have these players. You have the artist, the singer. We have these major record labels, the HBOs, the Sony Musics, and so on of the world. You also have digital service providers like Spotify and so on. Now you have the consumers, you have the customers, so to speak. You can have the regular filmmakers, for example, who want to use the music created by an artist in their movies. Or you might have the absolute end consumers, people who go about with the regular day jobs, they just want to listen to some music. They would also be purchasing, for example, songs from the record label, from the digital service provider, or maybe even just watching the movies made by the filmmakers. Lastly, we have the unwanted guests, the uninvited guests, the so-called music pirates. Now, taking this particular ecosystem, there are two challenges that you can consider. We can immediately identify. The first one is royalty payments. When an artist is creating content, creating music, the concept of royalty is that every time the music is being played, he or she should be paid royalty. Maybe it's just a few fractions of a dollar, but when you multiply it with the n number of times in which that song or music is being played, they should be making some really good money. Now, the problem is, it is not possible for them to track how many times this particular song is being played, how many times it is being accessed. Royalty is not being paid properly. The second challenge is piracy, and I don't need to tell you about this. Piracy affects the entire music industry in different ways. All the legitimate entities, they end up getting discouraged, they end up getting demotivated because content that they created is being misused without even their knowledge. How do we regulate this ecosystem? Blockchain has already started transforming the music industry with one simple concept called smart contracts. A lot of music artists have already started transitioning towards blockchain based music records labels and solutions. Their songs are being published only through blockchain based solutions. How does a smart contract work? It's a very simple application in which each of these users that I told you, the artist, the record label, the digital service provider, consumer, etc., they are authenticated as legitimate users. The song itself, the content itself, will be embedded within this application. Anytime a consumer wants to access the music, he or she will have to go through this application. He or she will have to authenticate themselves, make the payment if at all applicable, and then access the song. Now, if you remember, I told you earlier, one of the concepts of the blockchain is it is unalterable. There is no way that a pirate or somebody else can extract the music from this application and publish it on other forums unless they go for some other out of channel, out of band recording mechanisms. From the application, it is not possible to download the music itself. Think of Netflix. Netflix is not blockchain, but you will get the idea of what I'm talking about. Now, what happens here is through this application, everybody sees everybody else. The artist is able to see how many times his song was consumed or her song was consumed by the consumer. The record label is able to ensure that there are no unauthorized entities, so only legitimate customers are coming in. The filmmaker as well, every time his movie is being played, if that is also on the similar smart contract way or blockchain based platform, it will simply feed into this particular smart contract and he can pay the royalty based on the number of times his movie is actually being played. Complete transparency, removal of institutionalized control, and elimination of piracy, elimination of unwanted entities. This is just one example of how blockchain is transforming the music industry. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you think about this concept and try to map it to different spheres, different industries, the possibilities are endless if you think about it. For example, think about travel. Every time you catch a plane from one country to the other, you need to carry. Think about the list of documents you need to carry. First of all, there's your passport, the most fundamental document. Then you need your tickets, the boarding pass, your luggage tracking document, immigration clearance, visa. All these documents we have to carry. And if you're traveling as a group with your family, for example, you have other things to worry about, kids and whatnot. What if blockchain could come into this ecosystem? You have one ecosystem where you have the immigration department, the customs, the airport, the flight control, the airlines themselves. All these entities are on one ecosystem. And then comes the passenger. All that the passenger needs is one blockchain ID. Through this ID, everybody is able to see the clearance or the non-clearance of this particular passenger. They're able to trace the entire travel history of this passenger, and the entire travel process is seamless. All they need is one blockchain ID. These are the possibilities that a lot of countries are exploring already, using blockchain to remove your passport, remove your tickets and whatnot. There are other possibilities as well in the real estate, in the education sector, in the healthcare sector, patient history, for example. And this can be shared between your doctor, between your pharmacist, between your insurance company. One single blockchain ID is all you need. A lot of different use cases, ladies and gentlemen. So blockchain has the power to transform different sectors all over the world as we speak. Now, my focus today is on how blockchain is assisting cybercrime. And when I say cybercrime, you know that all cyber criminals, they operate for profit. They need to be paid. And I will ask you to think back on the lines of the dark web that I told you about earlier. In the dark web, they are virtually anonymous. How do they get paid? This is where blockchain is helping them, ladies and gentlemen. I told you, dark web, blockchain, and cryptocurrencies, all these concepts are going to get intertwined, and this is where it's happening. Cryptocurrencies is one implementation of blockchain. Smart contracts is, for example, another. You replace money, physical money that you and I are familiar with, you just replace it with virtual currencies, like, for example, Bitcoin. We have a lot of other players, like, for example, Monero, Litecoin, Ripple, etc., which is what I mentioned over here. The most popular and the most well adopted cryptocurrency happens to be Bitcoin, by the way. So there is no central bank, there is no reserve bank or someone who is authorizing different users, regulating different transactions and payments. We don't have that here in the Bitcoin ecosystem. What we have is a decentralized and distributed ecosystem through which payments can be made and received. How does this ecosystem work? I will explain this to you. But the answer to a lot of questions lies in this one fundamental concept called mining. We need miners to perform certain tasks. I will talk about this in one of the upcoming slides. Only on the basis of their successful completion of these tasks can a transaction, a Bitcoin transaction, go through. How does it work? I will tell you as we go down. Quick comparison between cryptocurrencies and traditional banking, just to understand the concept a little better. Well, traditional banking is founded on trust. I trust my bank. I've entrusted, I'm making sure that their physical coffers, their physical safes will not be broken into, which is why you and I are depositing money into into the bank safes. We also believe that their cybersecurity posture is robust, which means my internet banking application is not going to get hacked. My card is not going to get cloned. A lot of these risks are present within the traditional banking ecosystem. Cryptocurrency, on the other hand, is built on algorithms. It is built on completely mathematical algorithms with a limited supply. There is no concept of trust because it's built on maths. In traditional banking, you can reverse your transactions. For example, your card was charged without your even knowing it. There was a fraudulent transaction on your card. You want to dispute it, you can get the money back. It's reversible, it's straightforward. Now, guess what? With cryptocurrencies, transactions cannot be reversed. Once you pay somebody, there is no way you're taking that money back from him unless he or she decides to pay you back. This is another golden rule for cyber criminals, ladies and gentlemen, because everybody can see from their Bitcoin ID that they have been paid, but nobody can do anything about it. Nobody can take the money back from them. Users' privacy is not assured in your traditional banking ecosystem, but with cryptocurrencies, everybody knows your blockchain ID or your Bitcoin ID. But if you remember, I told you earlier, for in the dark web, it's very important for cyber criminals to remain anonymous. On a blockchain ecosystem, your anonymity is guaranteed. It's virtually impossible to find out who's the person behind a particular blockchain ID. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we come straight into the role that cryptocurrencies play when it comes to cybercrime. I'll remind you once again, ladies and gentlemen, your questions are most welcome. So please keep them coming. Type them into the chat window. And again, towards the end, we will have a short Q&A discussion as well. Now, what is the role that cryptocurrencies play in cybercrime? In this particular slide, ladies and gentlemen, I want to explain to you how does a Bitcoin payment work? And we're going to consider the case of a ransomware victim. Consider hypothetically that your organization has faced a ransomware attack. Your files have been encrypted, your critical servers are no longer accessible, and you only see a message from a cybercriminal telling you that you need to pay $5,000, which is equal to a few bitcoins, to a specific ID. This particular ID is something that you can access, that you can transact with if you download a so-called Bitcoin wallet. Now, Bitcoin wallets are open. They're on the Android Play Store, on the iOS App Store. You can download them and start transacting right away, right? So the ransomware victim, he already has an address, a Bitcoin address, and he has shared this with you. You will now need to download a Bitcoin wallet, and you will have to create a new Bitcoin address. It is recommended that for every transaction you use, you create a new address, just in order to ensure that your identity is all the more protected. Now, what do I mean by address? An address is nothing but a public and a private key pair. This touches upon the concepts of cryptography. I will not delve deeper into those because we do cryptography in our CISSP trainings. We already covered this in those trainings, which happen every week, by the way. I'll not delve into this, but there's something called asymmetric encryption, symmetric versus asymmetric. And in asymmetric key cryptography, we have a public key and a private key, and this public-private key pair is what we are generating every time you create an address, a Bitcoin address in your wallet. Now, you will initiate a transaction to pay this particular ransomware victim from your Bitcoin address. This transaction, let us assume it is transaction number 1 that you see over here. This transaction will now have to wait. It will wait for at least 10 minutes before it gets verified and it gets approved and the payment goes through to the ransomware victim. Now, what happens in those 10 minutes? Your transaction gets coupled with other simultaneous Bitcoin transactions. Like you can imagine, ladies and gentlemen, there were more than 1 billion Bitcoin transactions that were reported by Settle UK per day in 2015, which means in a second or in a minute, you can expect thousands of Bitcoin transactions going through. Now, these transactions, they will all get hashed. What do I mean by hashing? When you get time, please look it up. Please read more about hashing. Hashing is a very, very simple mathematical function which has specific properties. You take an input file of any length. Maybe it is a 3 gigabytes movie, or maybe it's a 64 KB notepad file. Now, when you pass these two input files through the same hash function, the output will always have the same length, ladies and gentlemen. That's one of the beautiful properties about hashing. Now, not only that, from the output, there is literally no way that you can go back to the input. It is a one-way function. If you remember, I told you, when you make a transaction on a blockchain, it cannot be reversed because of this beautiful property of hashing. It is a one-way function. You cannot reverse it. This again is why when a payment has been made, there is no way you can go back and undo that payment. If you remember, I told you about this. There is no way it can be done because hashing is a mathematical function which can only be carried forward. It cannot be reversed. Now, guess what? Not only do we hash, but we make it we keep on hashing so much that it is virtually impossible to reverse a transaction. What do I mean? Your transaction number 1 gets hashed. Other transactions, let's say 2, 3, and 4, they also get hashed. Not only that, they get coupled after hashing. They get combined together, and the union of these two hashed transactions gets hashed again and again and again and again. And this goes on and on until you have one consolidated hash value which pertains to all those transactions which happen within that 10-minute window. This is a potential new block which can be added onto the blockchain itself, onto the Bitcoin blockchain ecosystem. But guess what? It's still not ready. It's still not ready to be added. You also need to take the most recent block, the yellow block that you see over here. The most recent block will be taken, and that will also be hashed. and will be added to this new potential block. This, ladies and gentlemen, is where we are forming the chain, which is why we call it the blockchain. You take the previous most updated, or most recent block, hash it and add it to this particular potential new block. After this, the link has been established. Now, all you need to do is wait for the block to be verified, wait for the block to be approved, so to speak, which is where the miners come into the picture, the Bitcoin miners. Now, what does a Bitcoin miner do? A miner is an individual or group rather who is responsible for verifying these blocks, these new blocks. How they do this is they will have to solve a cryptographic puzzle. They'll have to pass this particular block through a cryptographic algorithm and produce an output which has a specific number of ones and zeros. This specific number of ones and zeros, this is a pattern which will be deduced, which will be inferred and dictated rather by the cryptographic algorithm itself, sorry, by the Bitcoin algorithm itself. So they will have to pass this new potential block through a number of hash functions and try to play around with the hash function such that the output has a specific pattern, a specific number of ones and zeros. Now, this is very, 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 very difficult. Sometimes it can even take days for a particular block to be mined, for a transaction to come through. But that individual or a group of individuals who is able to successfully do this, they will have to generate a proof of work and add it to the block. And only then will that block be added to the blockchain network itself. Why do they do this? Because, ladies and gentlemen, they get paid. They get paid in something called transaction fees. And you know the value of Bitcoin, it's very, very high. So even a small percentage of a transaction fee is sufficient to to pay the bills, I would say, at least for a couple of days, for a couple of weeks. So mining is a very, very hot, I will say, profession for a lot of individuals. Some of them engage in it full time, some of them engage in it as a part-time job. It requires very, very heavy computing power. Sometimes they even have rooms filled with servers just trying to solve these algorithms. Let me also add that this has led to the emergence of a new form of threat, cyber threat, called cryptojacking, where hackers, they want to mine these blocks, but they don't have the money to pay for the computers, the servers to solve these blocks. So what they do is they simply hack into other computers and steal their RAM, steal their CPU processing power, and start getting them to work for their nefarious purposes. This is cryptojacking, another topic that we can talk about. Right. So the new block gets added once it is mined successfully. So, ladies and gentlemen, for a cyber criminal, what are the benefits in this ecosystem? Think about that ransomware, the criminal who was behind that ransomware attack that hypothetically faced your organization. He was completely anonymous. He didn't require any permission to get on this ecosystem. He just had to get onto the Android or iOS App Store and simply download the Bitcoin wallet. There is no need to provide any government ID proof or anything like how we have to do with our traditional banking ecosystem. There was a completely decentralized ecosystem, which means no one is there to stop him, even though he's a cyber criminal, he or she. And lastly, it is completely unalterable. Transactions are instantaneous. They cannot be cancelled. They cannot be reversed. So even when people know who he is through his blockchain ID, they still can't do anything. They can't take the money back from that particular account. This screen, ladies and gentlemen, is probably familiar to you. This is the screen that the victims of the most popular ransomware attack in the history of the world, WannaCry, this is a screen that they received. Their files were encrypted and they got a message here which said, Bitcoin is accepted over here. You need to pay me in order to recover your files. Here is my Bitcoin address. Send $300 to this particular address. Anybody could access this address and see the balance, the bank balance, I would say, of this particular address, but nobody could find out who is the individual behind this particular address. I'll also mention that some time back, the FBI was able to apprehend the supposed individuals behind the WannaCry attack. Not only this, any other form of cyber attack or even other illegal activities that are carried out on the dark web, like you see over here, the choice of currency for most cyber criminals, for most criminals itself, is Bitcoin. Like you see over here, it is 4.94 Bitcoins, 2.63 Bitcoins, and so on. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is where Bitcoin and blockchain, to some extent, is powering the cybercrime economy, globally speaking. How can your organization stay safe from this ever-present, ever-looming threat of cyber attack? Ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to ransomware, the number one carrier of choice for cyber criminals is phishing. The malware, which is responsible for encrypting your files, will be embedded and sent over to you either within a Word document or a PDF, or maybe sent in a link, maybe in a phishing email. Phishing is the number one carrier of choice for cyber criminals when it comes to ransomware. What is your best bet against phishing? Training, ladies and gentlemen. We need to train our employees, customers, service providers, partners, and let them know about these threats, these risks, and how they can stay safe from these phishing attacks. If your data gets compromised, either because of insider mistakes made by employees or because of malicious actions of your employees, or maybe a cyber criminal himself who has been able to enter your network and is now performing lateral movement, traversing through your servers and looking for data to steal, we need to invest in DLP solutions. These tools will tell us when there is the potential risk of data being exfiltrated from your network, and it will also block it, sometimes proactively as well. Lastly, we also recommend being more proactive and monitoring the dark web. Dark web monitoring is a service that a lot of cybersecurity organizations offer, including Ingram Micro Cybersecurity. We will check on the dark web if there is any discussions on forums, on platforms, etc., pertaining to attacks against company X, Y, and Z, and we will let these companies know as a service, right? So trainings. We from Ingram Micro, ladies and gentlemen, we have a suite of training solutions that we can offer you. Trainings for different kinds of audiences. Maybe they are your employees, people from different backgrounds who know nothing much about cybersecurity, maybe not even technology. We can enable them on the risks. Or your cybersecurity or information security team, they themselves need to be upskilled. We have certification trainings going all the way up. Excuse me. Excuse me. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. So we go we go all the way up to the CISSP trainings. We also have the risk and compliance trainings, emergent technology trainings on IoT, cybersecurity, etc., as well as privacy. Privacy has picked up a lot of traction within the last few years, ever since the emergence of GDPR. And we are an authorized training center, an official training partner of the IAPP itself. So we have trainings that we can offer on CIPPE as well as CIPM, the most important certifications for a data protection officer to hold. When it comes to DLP, like I mentioned earlier, we have technology solutions that we distribute from any major cybersecurity vendor that you can think of. I put up some indicative logos over here like Broadcom, Forcepoint, as well as McAfee. We distribute their solutions in DLP. Just get in touch with us, we can help you on this. And from monitoring the dark web perspective, we have our own managed security services that we offer. Plus, we also offer technical solutions from Kaspersky, FireEye, Broadcom, AT&T Cybersecurity, which was formerly called as Alien Vault as well. From our services portfolio, let me remind you once again, ladies and gentlemen, especially those who joined late, we have holistic trainings, consultancies, managed security services that we can offer for your company. Like I said earlier, we are based right here in Dubai Internet City, and we are very happy to collaborate with you on these services and solutions. And we also distribute the technologies from all these different vendors, cybersecurity vendors that you can see over here. So that brings me to the close of today's training, ladies and gentlemen. Let me thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for being with us today. I hope you were able to learn about blockchain as well as cybercrime today. And of course, we are happy to be in touch with you and always exchange more and more with you on these topics. So if you have any questions, feel free please to type them into the chat window. And also you can unmute yourself as well if you wish. I'll start with the questions first though. Bitcoin wallet is similar to blockchain wallet. It's a question by Naveed Noor. Thank you so much, Naveed. Uh, Bitcoin wallet is something, it's an application that you and I, we need to download it if you wish to transact on the dark or using Bitcoins itself. So you want to receive payments, you want to send payments, you want to see how different transactions are happening on Bitcoin. I strongly recommend just to understand the ecosystem itself, just get onto your Android on your Play Store, Google Play Store, or your iOS App Store, and just download this Bitcoin wallet. When you say blockchain wallet, I'm not really sure what you mean by that, Naveed, because you have a wallet for different cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Litecoin and whatnot, Monero, etc. So you can download those for cryptocurrencies. Blockchain is the framework. It's an underlying framework on which you have smart contracts, you have Bitcoins, you have cryptocurrencies, and different, a lot of other implementations and implications. So there is no blockchain wallet per se, as per my knowledge. Feel free, please, to correct me if I'm wrong. We can definitely discuss this. Thank you, Sami, for the questions for the chat. The session is being recorded. Yes, we will upload it on our YouTube channel. If you simply type Ingram Micro Cybersecurity on YouTube, you will find all our recordings, including this one there. And plus, the link for the recording will be available right here in the chat of this Teams meeting, because you will all see the link right here on the chat after it is ready. I think 15 minutes after the session is done, we should get it. Will the slides be shared, Sami? I do regret to inform you, I will not be able to share the slides, but nevertheless, we have the entire recording which we can share, and it's out there for all of us to access. I apologize, I'm not able to share the slides. Question from Abdul Shakir. Thank you, sir, for the question. How do I start learning about cybersecurity? Can you recommend online courses? Okay. Great question, Shakir, Abdul Shakir. Thank you for this. Now, how do you start learning about cybersecurity? Well, this is a question which is very profound, because the field of cybersecurity is extremely vast. Now, I will tell you, I will ask you to not get overwhelmed by the overall breadth of the subject itself. Rather, what I will ask you to do is, before you get into cybersecurity, I will suggest that you build a very strong foundation in technology, because the objective of cybersecurity is to protect technology. So unless we have a strong understanding of technology and how it works, our understanding of cybersecurity is going to be that much more limited. So first of all, we need to have a strong foundation in technology. Now, what do I mean when I say technology? We need to, first of all, understand, we need to start with the foundations of networking, OSI model, routing protocols, firewalls, different firewall models, bastion hosts, DMZs, all of this, etc. How does IPv4, how does IPv6, how do they work? How are packets routed? What are the contents of a packet? This is one way of understanding it. Secondly, apart from networking, we need to look at servers, different operating systems, Windows, Linux. And once we understand more about these operating systems, that is when we'll start thinking a little bit about the weaknesses in these operating systems, in these server environments itself. The third dimension that I would recommend is software, applications. Application security is an extremely important, often not that emphasized, but extremely important component of cybersecurity, software security. So I'm not telling you we should know to code, but I'm telling you we should know at least what goes into a waterfall model. What are the different phases of software development, and what are the different logic behind different applications itself. We don't necessarily need to know how to code, but we should be able to read a particular application code and understand the logic. What is happening over here? What is a function? What is a recursive call? All these areas we need to understand. Now, once this foundation has been built, then we can start delving deeper into cybersecurity, where we're going to look at how to exploit the vulnerabilities of these technology ecosystems. This is where I would recommend jumping into online courses if you are comfortable with those. Ingram Micro Cybersecurity, yes, we are offering free weekly trainings like this one every single Wednesday. We touch upon different fundamental areas of cybersecurity. We touch upon blockchain like we have today. We touch upon cryptography. We touch upon security operations, incident response, a lot of other topics that we cover every single week. I'd strongly recommend jumping into our YouTube channel where you'll find a lot of useful information. This is my first recommendation. Secondly, think about looking at the CISSP syllabus. I know you'd be surprised why am I saying CISSP, because it's normally considered for those who have at least 5 to 10 years of experience. But let me tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, it is extremely, extremely useful to understand the fundamentals of cybersecurity once you have the technology foundations already established. Because that one textbook from CISSP touches upon the entire domain of cybersecurity, all the different subjects of cybersecurity, and you will get into that mindset, how to think like a security person, like a security manager. So you get into that specific mindset. I will strongly recommend just go for it and start reading the textbook. Go through the materials and you will then understand what really is there in cybersecurity. If you prefer to work on the red teaming side, where you want to get more specialized in ethical hacking, digital forensics also, that is a completely different ballgame. You should have strong foundations in coding. You should know Python, Perl, and Unix as well. You should definitely know these different technologies. And of course, I would recommend just download Kali Linux, install it on a laptop, and start hacking away, start playing away with the different tools. That's a different ball game altogether. I hope that was helpful, Abdul Shakir. I know my answer was not short, it was not succinct, but I hope that was helpful. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? All right. So if there's no further questions, let me once again thank you, everybody, for joining us today, for giving us your time as well as your attention. We from Ingram Micro Cybersecurity, we hope that we are able to serve you better through these trainings. Of course, there are deeper ways in which we can interact. Just get in touch with us. We can do specific engagements for your organization, consultancy, training, managed security services, different products that we've developed as well. More than happy to collaborate with you. I hope you enjoyed today's session. I, for one, definitely enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you so much. Have an excellent rest of your day. Thank you.